For everything you do online, Akamai makes it possible. Protecting investments, fueling e-commerce, securing the workforce, safeguarding healthcare, defending financial systems, energizing the metaverse, making life better for billions of people, billions of times a day. Akamai, power and protect life online.
Everyone, thank you for having me. I just want to say Dave from IBM stole my mi español es muy malo joke. So I'll just start off by apologizing in advance for speaking in English. It's a pleasure to be back in Costa Rica. It's a beautiful country, and the work that is being done here is really impactful. So I thank all of you for being a part of that. So I did weird opening slides. I introduced myself. I want to brag about my family. These are my children and my wife. Very happy. I've been in InfoSec and security for 25 years. I grew up wrestling, doing judo, jujitsu, grappling, and also was a skateboarder. So if anybody wants to go skateboarding later, just let me know. We'll talk a little bit about some key areas around the AI landscape. And I want to really simplify this. We're going to try to have a little bit of fun. Also, I understand I'm standing in between you guys and the cocktail hour, so I'll try to make this pretty brief. We'll talk about training large language models, what that means, the ethics around how these models are fed, Hack the Future, which was an interesting event at DEF CON in Las Vegas last month, the legality around what's happening, what might be happening in the future, as well as security operations. How can we leverage AI for the future, and then how are attackers already doing the same thing? So let's get into it. I was bragging the other day. I learned how to do this transparent slide thing where you have the video in the back, so you're going to see a lot of this. I apologize. Let's talk about training. So there's a lot of different LLMs that are in existence today. The idea is that you can create a large language model, which at minimum has to be 1,000 gigabytes, so 1 terabyte of data. So if you think about 1 terabyte of text-based data, that's a whole ton of data. Of course, some of the larger LLMs are exceedingly large in upwards of multi-terabytes. But let's talk a little bit about something I tried to do with AI. I said, hey, I'm going to make me a picture of a large language model. This was the first thing that came up. Just the word language, large, and then a model on the runway. If you notice, nobody has hands. Like, this is the stuff with AI you have to keep in mind. People's hands are weird. You know, I saw someone try to say, show me a mechanic working with a wrench. The hand was weird. The wrench, AI doesn't know what a wrench looks like, apparently. So I was trying to, work on this. I said, okay, give me another option. So I use more prompts. Prompts are what you give AI in order for it to give you back something that you're requesting. This one, it misspelled language. That's not my fault, by the way. That actually happened. But this one looks pretty good. They're all there. It's a large language model. People are taking photos. But I think this one kind of took the cake. It's not exactly the way I wanted it. But as you can see, it takes many iterations to get back from AI what you think would be instantaneously available to you. So that's one of the things we'll talk about is the accuracy and the efficacy of AI. So I mentioned before, the more data you feed into a large language model, the more accurate and the more efficacy and accuracy you can get out of the results. So if you don't know about Akamai, we have traffic that we serve across the internet. We basically serve portions of the internet on your behalf. Thank you, and you're welcome, right? If you've downloaded a movie online or watched a streaming video or listened to streaming music or done anything basically with some of the biggest companies on the web, that goes through Akamai first. We saw a high watermark of just recently of 275 terabits per second. So our previous high watermark was about 250 terabits per second, and we did a little analysis for fun. We said, if you were to take every movie that's ever been made, and if you go to IMDb, the number's, some 7,000, something like that, and then you take a DVD quality video, which would be about 8 gigabytes each, you could download all of that data in 36 seconds. That's the throughput that's going through Akamai every single day. So we are also seeing 7 trillion DNS queries a day. 330,000 servers. Again, we're sitting in front of these world's largest businesses and networks and governments to protect them from cyber attacks. We're also in over 135 different countries. The reason I mention this is because when we start talking about what you can do with AI, and certainly what we're trying to do in the future, protecting our clients, we do it based on the idea that we are seeing collective intelligence from all these different types of attacks around the world, and we're trying to feed those into the tools that we make for our clients. But first, let's talk about ethics. Again, here's the cool background logo. Didn't come out just as bright as I thought it would, but some of the ethics. Now, I'm not going to poke fun at the National Security Agency, but they've been known to collect data themselves. Let's not get into a little war here. But the concept is when you feed an LLM, the data you feed it is now part of that data set forever. So we'll talk a little bit about maybe a certain government might say, listen, we're not going to feed privatized data into this LLM because someone could potentially query that and get a response back that's giving personal information or IP data or government secrets for that matter. It could give that as a result. So when we start talking about the ethics around feeding LLMs, it's very important to understand classified data, personalized data, corporate, intellectual property data, and how that should not be fed into LLMs in general. Again, if you're from Russia or China, I'm not poking fun at you. It's just that there are parts of the world in which the laws that govern what is right, in terms of computer fraud and abuse, what is legal in terms of copyright protection and copyright laws, they're very different, right? So we have to understand that as these models are being made, we're going to have to suffer the after effects of this change. So when we talk about ethics, that is one of the most important key factors that we talk about. How do you govern what is fed into an LLM? And we'll talk about some of the oopsies that have happened in the past that have actually come to light in the news. One of them, if you think about, hey, I'm gonna go buy a new Land Rover, right? The Range Rover Evoque, it's a very popular Land Rover model, except Jaguar Land Rover realized that there was a car being released in China called the Landwind that is exactly like the Range Rover Evoque. In fact, they tried to actually patent all the different parts and the machinery and the technology to themselves. And they just won a big lawsuit that said, you cannot patent this because you've obviously stolen these trade secrets and built them into your machine. We saw this years ago with the data breach of Lockheed Martin and Northrop Grumman. All of a sudden, China unveils this new J-31 strike fighter that looks an awful lot like the F-22 that Lockheed Martin had developed. They even put an extra afterburner, to make it a little bit more efficient. So ethics around this, intellectual property, are definitely going to become bigger issues as this technology grows. Let's talk about Hack the Future. I thought this was very colorful. It's not animated. I apologize, but we're trying to just make it interesting. Well, what was interesting is that what was the number? I think like 30,000 people showed up in Las Vegas for DEF CON. And they had the first ever generative AI red team challenge. And what this means is when you develop applications and you have servers on the internet and you have business processes, you probably have a red team that comes around about as often as you go to the dentist, maybe once a quarter, maybe once a year when you're just about to get audited, and they check out your systems and they verify, is this hackable? And if so, let me tell you how I did it so you can correct your security posture. Well, AI systems, as far as I know, don't have that process in place yet. So this comes forth, the generative red team challenge at DEF CON, where the attackers had several different goals. One of them was, I'm gonna make AI give me false information. We'll talk about a couple of cases where it's already doing that on its own, but the false information, getting an LLM to provide false information was very easy for the attackers. Some of the other things, prompt leaking. So this sounds like, like an aging problem where you might need a diaper, but prompt leaking is essentially where you trick the AI into giving you information about the prompts that it's actually sending back to the LLM. So this could be proprietary data about how the LLM is actually configured that could be leaked back. So this is a sensitive data exposure issue. Another issue we saw was the idea of jailbreaking. So make an LLM, if you say, write me shellcode for a Linux malware variant, it'll come back and say, no, I can't do that. Like that's wrong. That's against my, the 3 rules of robotics. Like that's against my coding, right? But what they realized, these are called guardrails, by the way, and what they realized pretty quickly is that, hey, there are ways to trick an LLM into responding with data that is outside of its guardrail system. In fact, when ChatGPT first came out, I'm part of the Dallas Hackers Association in Dallas, so shout out to the crew. When ChatGPT first came out, the first thing we started researching was, can we write shellcode? And you have to understand, when you ask an AI to write shellcode or some kind of malicious code, it's going to scour its database, if you will, of other people who have written shellcode. And if that's malicious, it's going to say, hey, I know this to be a malicious process. I can't respond it to you. But if you have access to the AI, the API of this ChatGPT, you were able to get this to bypass these guardrails. So big problem. Let's talk about legality. This is probably goes hand in hand with ethics. The legality, some of the issues that are coming up, if you guys are familiar with Sarah Silverman, very funny American comedian, she has a lawsuit right now that's claiming that the responses from OpenAI with Meta are actually part of her proprietary joke-telling style. I'm not sure how you would, my joke-telling style is to retell jokes from the 80s. Like they're so far back, people don't realize that I'm telling somebody else's joke. So I'm usually safe there. But this has come up. This is going to happen more and more because, again, proprietary data is being fed into AI, into these LLMs, in order to make the responses more accurate, right? You want to include the wealth of knowledge of the world. That's the idea. Another case that I thought was funny was a lawyer submitted his closing brief written by AI. And as the judge, who's been a lawyer for 40, 50 years, as he starts to review this, he realized that the case law that was written, state of Arizona versus Tony Lauro, indecent exposure. Hopefully that's not the ruling, but and then all of the fake content around what that case law was generated by AI. And of course, this is like cheating on your homework if you're a lawyer. So he's getting in trouble with the authorities and with the legal system. Finally, this is a big whoopsie, and this can happen to anyone. But if you allow your developers or your company to use ChatGPT, in a particular case, a few cases that happened was they said, hey, here's the notes from my meeting. Write me a summary so I can give that to my boss. Well, that contains some proprietary information about deals that we're closing. And another case contained actual code, proprietary code. And they were checking it. Tell me if this has any SQL injections in it. That's a great use of AI. But if you're putting proprietary code into this database, it now lives there forever. Just like the pictures you put on MySpace in 2003. All right, let's talk about security operations. Security operations, this is probably the cooler part because this is where we can actually say, hey, we're going to now operationalize the things that AI might be able to do, maybe now and then maybe in the future, and we're going to try to make it work for us. And we'll talk also about how the attackers are using this to work against us. So at Akamai, for a while now, we've been using machine learning and AI to say, listen, when we're creating rules to stop web application attacks or bots, we're not just going to say we know what bad looks like, because bad can look like any number of things. So if we can use AI and machine learning and actually monitor how requests are being made and what the relationship from the requester is with that application and how they're making it function, we might be able to see something like, hey, this is a 0-day that's trying to exploit a plugin in WordPress, except there's no CVEs attached to that particular plugin in WordPress, which now we know this is a 0-day that's happening against WordPress. So these are kind of ways that you can use web application AI to identify what's the intent of this requester, and is it outside of the boundaries that we normally would like to see. Some other things that we're doing is when you're creating policy, it's great to, if you have a Visio diagram that says, hey, these are all the computers on my network, and as far as I recall, 6 years ago when we made it, this is how they were talking to each other. And you have your application data flow diagrams, you have your network diagrams to say, this is how we're segmenting the network. The reality of this is that these things are changing all the time. So using AI and machine learning to help you basically identify and label what systems do. Like this is a Windows domain controller. The domain controller has this operating system because we're interrogating the TCP stack and we know that this is how that version of the operating system talks. You can now put that into a suggested rule. So when you're creating these rule sets for massive environments, you don't have to go in and, and sit there and boop, 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 all day long to try to get it to do what you want it to do. So this automatic labeling, this automatic categorization also works in terms of, a gentleman earlier was talking about 0 days, like log4j. Well, let me write an OS query to search where in our environment does this vulnerability live, and across all different vendor implementations, that might look totally different. So let's use AI to identify where does this exist, and then give us a recommended kind of virtual patch or virtual firewall rule set to block that request or to block that operating system from being vulnerable to this. So for security operations, I thought this was cool. The whole idea of like saying, hey, remember the early days of web development? You're like, I'm going to build a website. And you would go and basically copy the code from another website and then put it in yours and then take out the stuff you don't need to use. That's very common in development all over the world, all the time, every day. So as a security engineer, you might be doing something similar. You might say, I want to write a snort rule to look for the eternal blue exploit on Windows systems, right? So asking AI to do that, you get back this code. The caveat is this is not always 100% accurate. It's not always 100% including all the things it should. And code written by AI also has a lot of vulnerabilities because it doesn't yet understand that what it's writing has all these other implications, right? It's hard enough for a human to understand that, as we know with the development process over the course of years. And AI is not quite there just yet. So for attackers, this is interesting. You guys remember the Nigerian prince scam? I'm still waiting on a few million, so we'll see if it gets here. But, you might, the modern version of this might be you're getting SMS text messages, which, by the way, is called smishing. I think it's weird. It's a weird word. Just kind of makes you feel funny. But SMS phishing is the process of me saying, hey, I'm going to send you a text message that says, hey, you've got an Amazon delivery, or from your mail carrier, you have a delivery. I did this last night in my little practice run. I said, raise your hand if you have an Amazon delivery in the mail right now. And if you got an email, you might click on it. All right, so, and then it was brought to my attention that not a lot of people use Amazon here necessarily. So pick your shipping provider, pick your delivery of choice. And what you find is that this is social engineering in play, right? This is pretexting, which basically says, here's a reason why you should click on this message, because you do order from Amazon and you maybe have one in flight. So maybe you're Charles here and you're going to get an important delivery, right? These are all reasons to click through this. But this looks a little silly. It kind of looks like, listen, we all kind of know what this looks like now, right? So there was a recent article that said that phishing scams written by AI are devilishly effective. I thought that was quite literary of this blogger to say that. But devilishly effective. Let me give you an example. I want to spearfish the CEO of a technology company. I want you to write me an email reaching out as a vendor who works at this company, making context of the fact that we have a long-standing relationship and partnership, reference the kids' names because I met them at a golfing event that happened 4 months ago, and it was on social media. All of these different things are now pretext reasons for that person, that CEO, to click that email and actually get compromised. So this is a big problem. So what will the future bring? This is the big question, right? We're all kind of wondering, are we still gonna have jobs, As far as I know, Skynet should have taken over by now, so we're kind of safe from that aspect. But other people in the past, when new technology came out, they asked themselves, what would the future bring? Like if you manufactured buggies, carriages to be pulled by horses, and I know this is a car being pulled by a horse. Maybe they broke down, but you'd be surprised to know that a lot of the carriage buggy manufacturers actually parlayed themselves into trying to make automobiles. Not a lot of them succeeded, unfortunately. But the idea is we can't be afraid of technology. We have to adapt, right? Somebody else who had to adapt. Let me go back. Okay, what if you were, the railroad company, and you said, man, cars are going to fly our cargo everywhere. How are we going to compete with, planes are going to fly our cargo everywhere. How are we going to compete with that? Well, it turns out planes can't carry, 17 million tons of steel across a country, but trains can, right? So there's different factors here. What's good for one technology may not be good for the other. And then the last example here, this looks so scary. This, I think, is an AT&T switching center in the turn of the century, last century. And to me, this looks horrifying. You get tangled in these cords. It's all dusty. I'm sure there's like bugs and rats living in there, which, by the way, is where bugs in the system came. We'll go to that later. All right, so the last thing, I said, let me try to have AI write me cool book titles to be used in the future. And I said, okay, AI is a cybersecurity tool. That's pretty straightforward. Understanding large data sets. Okay, that's pretty cool. Forest through the trees, a little bit more esoteric. Using AI to defend your data. The takeaways here are this. AI is good for autonomously doing things that real humans don't want to do every single day. So automating these large tasks and identifying vulnerabilities. Threat hunting, locating indicators of compromise, things that are happening across large data sets that you may not be able to correlate over time. So even if you're bringing everything into Splunk and your log correlation tools, over time, these things kind of get lost in the noise. And then it's also being used by attackers, right? So we must adapt our defenses. What will it not do? AI is a tool that complements human expertise, does not replace it. It cannot be trusted to provide 100% accurate output, and it will not take your job for the foreseeable future. And I just want to make one note. I noticed a lot of the conversations today were about education, educating our kids, educating the students. I want to make one note. We have to educate ourselves to tell our kids that they don't have to ask permission to learn something. You can learn absolutely anything on the internet. You don't need a degree to do it. You don't need someone to give you a promotion to do it. You don't even need to change jobs to learn something that you want to do in another part of your job. So let's teach our kids not to ask permission to learn something. Thank you very much.